Ghislaine Maxwell's latest escape bid collapses as judge says new Epstein files strengthen case against her. Miscarriage of justice, claim crushed by federal judge. Ghislaine Maxwell has suffered another major legal defeat after a federal judge rejected her attempt to overturn the conviction that put her in prison for 20 years. The latest challenge was significant because Maxwell argued that newly disclosed material connected to the Jeffrey Epstein files exposed serious constitutional problems with her prosecution. Instead, U.S. District Judge Paul A. Engelmayer concluded that her petition fell dramatically short of the standard required to disturb the verdict. He found her claims meritless and described most or all of them as frivolous, leaving both her conviction and sentence intact. Maxwell tried to turn the new Epstein files into a route out of prison. Maxwell filed the challenge under Section 2255, a federal procedure allowing prisoners to attack their convictions or sentences on constitutional and other limited grounds after the normal trial and appeals process. Her petition was filed in December 2025, after earlier efforts to overturn her conviction had already failed. She argued that newly available material, including documents released following the Epstein Files Transparency Act, supported allegations that information favorable to her defense had been withheld, and that constitutional violations had undermined her trial. The transparency law had forced the Justice Department to publish enormous quantities of material connected to the investigations and prosecutions of Epstein and Maxwell. That gave Maxwell a potentially important opening. If genuinely new evidence had revealed serious prosecutorial misconduct, previously unavailable exculpatory evidence, or another constitutional defect capable of affecting the verdict, the material could have provided a foundation for further litigation. The judge found that it did not. The judge said the supposedly new evidence did not help Maxwell. Engelmayer concluded that there was no factual dispute raised by Maxwell capable of changing the result of her trial. He also found that much of what she characterized as new evidence was largely irrelevant to the charges on which she was convicted. More damagingly for Maxwell, the court found that portions of the material she relied upon did not exonerate her at all. Where the documents were relevant, Engelmayer said they could incriminate Maxwell or reinforce the legal conclusions she was challenging. That distinction matters. The huge public release of Epstein-related records has generated intense scrutiny because documents can contain names, allegations, correspondence, and investigative material of radically different evidential value. A document becoming public for the first time does not automatically make it new evidence capable of overturning a criminal conviction. Maxwell needed considerably more than material that appeared interesting, embarrassing, or previously unseen by the public. She needed evidence with enough legal weight to undermine the reliability of her conviction. Engelmayer found none. Most of her arguments faced another serious problem. The ruling also highlighted the procedural barriers confronting Maxwell after years of litigation. Many of the arguments in her petition had either already been raised during her direct appeal or could have been raised earlier, according to the court. Federal post-conviction proceedings are not designed to provide defendants with an unlimited series of complete retrials whenever another argument emerges. Claims that have already been rejected, or that were available during an earlier appeal but were not pursued, can face powerful procedural restrictions. That made Maxwell's task exceptionally difficult even before the court considered whether the new Epstein material actually supported her allegations. Her previous appellate record illustrates how far the case has already traveled. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit affirmed the district court's judgment of conviction, finding among other things that her sentence was procedurally reasonable. Maxwell then asked the U.S. Supreme Court to intervene. The Supreme Court denied her petition on October 6, 2025. The habeas petition therefore represented a different and much narrower route to attacking a conviction that had already survived the normal appellate process. The original case against Maxwell remains intact. A federal jury convicted Maxwell in December 2021, following a closely watched trial centered on her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and her role in facilitating his sexual abuse of minors. The Justice Department says Maxwell and Epstein worked together between 1994 and 2004 to identify and groom girls, including some as young as 14, before they were sexually abused. The judgment ultimately imposed concurrent prison terms, including a 240-month sentence, equivalent to 20 years. Court records show convictions were entered on multiple counts following the jury verdict. while Maxwell was acquitted on another count, and other counts were dismissed. That conviction is important to separate from the much broader universe of speculation surrounding Epstein. The criminal case against Maxwell was not based simply on her knowing Epstein, appearing in photographs with him, or being named somewhere in an investigative archive. It was based on testimonial and documentary evidence presented to a jury in federal court. The latest ruling concluded that Maxwell's new petition did not expose a defect capable of overturning that result. Why the Epstein files argument was potentially so explosive. The release of millions of pages connected to Epstein created an unusual situation. Investigative material that had previously been inaccessible suddenly became available for defendants, victims, politicians, lawyers, journalists, and the public to examine. That has already fueled disputes over what appearing in the Epstein files actually proves. Some documents can establish direct communications or movements. Others record allegations, third-party claims, duplicated information or material gathered during investigations without proving wrongdoing. For Maxwell, however, the legal question was narrower. Did anything in those releases materially undermine the prosecution that convicted her? The court's answer was emphatically no. Indeed, the ruling creates an awkward reversal in Maxwell's strategy. Material presented as evidence that the criminal process had failed her was instead characterized by the judge as irrelevant in large part, and potentially incriminating where it did matter. Maxwell's legal options are getting narrower. The ruling does not mean Maxwell can never file another legal document connected to her conviction. Federal prisoners can continue attempting appeals and other post-conviction remedies where procedural rules permit them. But every major rejection makes the road harder. Maxwell has now seen her conviction upheld on direct appeal, failed to persuade the Supreme Court to hear her case, and lost this substantial collateral attack based partly on the newly released Epstein material. The significance, therefore, extends beyond one unsuccessful motion. The central theory behind this challenge was that the extraordinary release of Epstein-related records might reveal something powerful enough to reopen questions about Maxwell's prosecution. Instead, the court found that the new material did not create the breakthrough she needed. What happens next? Maxwell remains subject to the 20-year federal prison sentence imposed after her 2021 conviction. Unless a higher court eventually accepts a further challenge or another extraordinary legal development emerges, the judgment against her remains fully operative. The wider Epstein records will continue generating political arguments, investigations, and public scrutiny. But Maxwell's latest defeat exposes the difference between a document being sensational and being legally transformative. Millions of newly public pages created another opportunity to challenge the story of the Epstein case. They did not, according to this ruling, create a reason to erase Maxwell's conviction. For Maxwell, that may be the most damaging consequence of the decision. She tried to turn one of the largest releases of Epstein material into evidence that her conviction could not stand, only for the court to conclude that the record still points firmly in the opposite direction.